increasing tension.
The era of strategic patience is over.
The vice president issues a warning to North Korea during a surprise visit to the Korean peninsula. Historic vote. Turkey grants sweeping new powers to the nation's president after a controversial referendum. Delivering hope, an EWTN News Nightly special report from Haiti, a nation still recovering from a devastating hurricane. Plus, the Catholic organization helping out. And Easter at the Vatican. The Holy Father celebrates the resurrection of our Lord, Jesus Christ. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, April 17th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Vice President Mike Pence says the United States stands shoulder to shoulder with South Korea in the face of North Korean threats. Pence made a surprise visit to the Korean demilitarized zone just one day after a failed North Korean missile test. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee joins us from the White House with more. Good evening, Wyatt.
Lauren, good evening. The unannounced visit comes at the start of a 10-day trip to Asia for Vice President Pence. He says the U.S. backs the people of South Korea 100%. Speaking on behalf of President Trump, Pence also saying all options are on the table to deal with the threat posed by North Korea.
North Korea would do well not to test his resolve or the strength of the armed forces of the United States in this region.
Vice President Mike Pence and the acting South Korean president standing firm against the regime of Kim Jong-un. In a trip full of Cold War symbolism, Pence traveled to the line marking the demilitarized zone, a 2.5-mile wide and 160-mile long buffer that separates North and South Korea. Later, he met with American military.
It's inspiring for me to see the resolve of these soldiers, to see the alliance that we have forged with the people of South Korea throughout the generations.
But Pence says the U.S. is growing impatient with North Korea and its unwillingness to rid itself of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Former Army Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano served in the demilitarized zone in the 1970s.
What's changed is the tremendous progress in their nuclear weapons program, both in the missiles, in their range and reliability, and the diversity of ways they can launch them.
Carafano says that's why the Trump administration plans to bring the latest anti-missile technology to South Korea. He says that and keeping some 37,000 U.S. troops there are a deterrent to the regime.
It is a manageable but complicated situation that really requires consistent U.S. policy and a persistent presence in the region.
The White House says another key player is China, who President Trump hopes will put more pressure on North Korea to stop building its nuclear program. The president is urging China to use its economic leverage to play a more constructive role on this sensitive issue. Lauren?
The vice president says the U.S. will continue to build up South Korea's missile defense system. What exactly does that mean?
Well, Lauren, James Carafano says that means deploying a variety of different anti-missile defense systems. Really, one of those is called THAAD, which is built to shoot down rockets over high population areas like Seoul. But they also have systems aimed at more long-range missiles to protect other allies in the region, like Japan as well. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. President Donald Trump signs legislation allowing states to deny federal funding for abortion provider Planned Parenthood. Susan B. Anthony List President Marjorie Dannenfelser was inside the Oval Office during the signing of the pro-life. During the signing, the pro-life group thanked the president in a tweet for undoing the rule set in place by former President Obama. Marjorie also tweeted out this picture with Concerned Women for America's CEO Penny Nance and Tennessee Representative Diane Black, who led the effort in the House to pass the bill. If you want to read more about this, visit our news partner at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Neil Gorsuch hears his first case as a Supreme Court justice. Justices like Clarence Thomas rarely speak, but Gorsuch started asking questions less than 15 minutes into today's case about employment discrimination. In the next few weeks, justices will also hear arguments in a religious liberty case involving a baker who refused to make a cake for a same-sex wedding. Arkansas becomes the center of a fight over the death penalty. The state wants to execute 8 people on death row before the end of the month, when one of the drugs it needs for lethal injections expires. Judges agreed to block the executions while they review legal challenges, but the state is trying to get those holds removed. Hollywood actor Johnny Depp joined protesters in Arkansas for an anti-death penalty rally on Saturday. Groups like the Catholic Mobilizing Network are also asking the state to spare the inmates' lives. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The U.S. urges Turkey to protect basic rights and freedoms following yesterday's vote to give the country's president sweeping new power. Thousands of people celebrate a new constitution in Turkey.
Gerekse sandık başında tercihini.
It gives President Recep Tayyip Erdogan more power than ever, with the country replacing its parliamentary system of governance with a presidential one.
Bölücü hainler.
That means the prime minister's job will be abolished and all the authority will be put in the president's hands. The yes or no referendum came down to the narrowest of margins, with 51% voting yes and nearly 49% no. President Erdogan spoke to the crowd after polls closed last night, thanking his supporters. But with celebration from the yes camp came sorrow from opponents. They say they faced intimidation and threats of violence and say the changes do not provide enough checks and balances. One political analyst who has lived in Turkey for nearly 30 years is worried about the lack of trust among the Turks and a highly politicized judicial system.
Even if the courts rule that there was no irregularities, a lot of people in the country won't believe it. And this is, again, a very major problem going forward. You really need the people in the country to trust the system.
The new constitution, which allows the president to appoint ministers, judges, and other top officials, is set to go into effect in 2019. International monitors say they found irregularities in the vote, but the Turkish Foreign Ministry rejects those claims. Journalist Fariba Nawa is in Istanbul, Turkey, monitoring reaction to the referendum. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Critics say President Erdogan already has too much power. When I was in Turkey reporting just a week ago, people were 50-50, really split over this. What's the reaction about this referendum that you're getting on the ground?
Well, it's still the same, that half of the population that voted for the referendum to pass are celebrating and actually quite upset that the other half who voted no and are on the streets demonstrating as we speak are upset about it. There's quite a lot of anxiety among those who lost. They feel like this was their last chance and they lost it. Many people I spoke to today when I was outside were talking about leaving.
Interesting. I was talking to a tour guide when I was there who said that tourism has just plummeted in Turkey, and she doesn't even think that she can stay because she won't have a job.
I think that's what a lot of analysts are also predicting, is that the economy is going to be the first sign that will show these yes voters that this might not just have been a good idea. And making this president more powerful may not be the answer to Turkey's problems.
It was a very close vote, 51% yes, 48% no. Is there a reason to doubt the reality of the 51%?
According to the opposition parties, yes, because there are videos showing voter fraud at this point, and they want proof, and they want a recount, and they want to cancel the election at this point. They want 37% of the vote recounted, and that's why they have not announced official results until the next 10 to 12 days, they said.
Now, President Erdogan had said in his acceptance speech that he would reinstate the death penalty, and there are hundreds of journalists and others in prison for expressing their beliefs. Do you think that he will use these new powers and enact the death penalty on those who are in prison?
Many of us journalists here, foreign and local, are hoping not. But it remains to be seen. People are anxious, obviously, especially those in the press, because, as you know, the press has been purged to only support the government. Those who were in the no campaign had a very difficult time. They were not as visible as those in the yes campaign. And despite that, they got half of the vote. So for many, that is something that is the silver lining in all of this. And who knows, maybe there will be another referendum to vote for the death penalty. And many people in Turkey might support it.
Well, I have to say, in my short time there, Istanbul is just such a beautiful, beautiful city, and I know that many people were fearful of the future there. Thank you so much for your time. Freelance journalist Fariba Nawa.
Thank you.
Christians in Egypt celebrate Easter amid fear and heightened security. At least 8 agents surrounded the leader of the Coptic Christian Church as he led prayers Saturday night in St. Mark's Cathedral in Cairo. Earlier, he canceled Easter celebrations in the wake of the twin bombings on Palm Sunday. ISIS claimed responsibility for those attacks that killed nearly 50 people. President Trump and his family celebrate their first Easter egg roll at the White House. An estimated 21,000 people, some who won tickets through a lottery, took part in the tradition. First Lady Melania Trump helped organize the event, and the egg roll dates back to President Rutherford Hayes in 1878. My 9-year-old daughter and her friends were among the rollers, but it wasn't quite a roll. It was more like a hop or a toss. The goal was to push the egg with the wooden spoon down the lawn without lifting the egg off the ground. She told me it wasn't as easy as it looked. No matter, she was off like a shot to egg painting. Coming up, struggle to survive.
I don't think we could handle half of the things they go through on a day-to-day basis.
Hurricane damage hampers people in Haiti. Our EWTN News Nightly special report reveals their incredible endurance. And later, words of wisdom from our foundress, Mother Angelica. Hurricane Matthew killed more than 500 people when it hit Haiti last October, and the nation is still struggling to rebuild. But signs of progress are emerging. Mark Irons recently traveled to Haiti and reports on one Haitian community's journey.
6 months after vicious hurricane winds hit Haiti's southwest coast, families are still standing among the rubble.
Hurricane Matthew destroyed a lot of homes in Lacaille, Haiti, including this one. You can see where this tree came down, collapsed the roof, and destroyed this home.
Joseline Jean-Pierre lives in this hut with her husband, children, and godmother's family.
13 people are living inside this house.
She lost her farm animals and now struggles to find work to survive. She places hope only in God. For some Catholic parishioners just outside Lacaille, a place of prayer came crashing down. St. Anne Church reflects the hurricane's wrath. Mass is celebrated in a nearby schoolroom as the church awaits repairs. Matthew brought the next humanitarian crisis in a country riddled with poverty, a cholera epidemic, and 2010's massive earthquake. But 100-mile-per-hour winds can't flatten the Catholic faith. The crucifix at St. Anne remains intact. Father Wisblair Pluvios says it's proof that Jesus loves them. He says the strength of the Haitians to overcome difficulties comes naturally and joyfully. It's inside them, given from their ancestors who fought for Haiti's independence from France in the early 1800s.
They're the most resilient people on earth. I don't think we could handle half of the things they go through on a day-to-day basis.
Cameron Parker traveled from Colorado to work with Project Hope, a Lacaille-based ministry that partners with the U.S. group Cross Catholic Outreach. Since the October hurricane, they've repaired 114 homes, distributed housing materials to more than 60 families, and built 7 new houses in the surrounding communities they serve. And plans to construct Joseline's family a new home are underway. Like many Haitians, this family couldn't afford to rebuild after Hurricane Matthew. But Project Hope lived up to its name. The father says it was like Jesus Christ came down from his throne in heaven to provide for them. In Lakai, the recovery effort is slow, and hundreds of families still need urgent assistance. But hope still stands. Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Joining us now to talk more about the situation in Haiti is Kim Lamberty, Director of Mission Engagement with Catholic Relief Services. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
We were just looking at those pictures, and you say you've been there, you recognize all of that.
Yeah, I was just there, and the destruction was horrible after Hurricane Matthew, just as it was after the earthquake in 2010.
What is Catholic Relief Services doing?
So Catholic Relief Services has been in Haiti for more than 60 years, accompanying the Haitian Church and the Haitian people in their poverty relief and long-term development goals. That includes emergency relief, and we were on the ground when Hurricane Matthew hit. We have an office in Lakai, and we were immediately able to distribute tarps and hygiene kits right away to the people who were hit hardest.
One of the things that Mark learned on this trip, he was telling me, is that it's so important that the local communities are able to be more self-reliant. How do you promote that?
Well, in a number of ways. Obviously, we do emergency relief. We have to. But in addition to that, we work with families so that they have seeds, so they can replant their crops, so that they will have a harvest next year, and they don't end up being permanently dependent on emergency relief. We have long-term agricultural programs like coffee and cocoa, so that families have an income, so that they can provide for themselves and rebuild their assets.
And that's so important psychologically, too.
Yes, it's important to respect the dignity of the Haitian people, and this is one of the ways that we respect the dignity of Haitians and Haiti.
In all of Mark's reports, what we're seeing is that this amazing sense of faith in God, despite these terrible, terrible circumstances. What have you learned about faith from your experience there?
I've learned so much, from the Haitian people, and one thing I can tell you is that they, more than any other people I've ever spent time with, because you never know what's going to hit, right? They, more than anyone else, understand their need for God and their complete and total dependence on God and on each other. And I think that in the U.S. we can really learn a lot from that, and I know I have.
Tell me what we can do to help.
So Catholic Relief Services talks about prayer, learning, acting, and giving, PLAG. I think prayer is the most important thing. We just finished with Lent up through Easter, and we were asked to enter into the suffering of Jesus, and we can enter into the suffering of Jesus through prayer for those in the world who suffer.
Who are less fortunate.
It's one of the most important things. But we can also take action with groups, supporting groups that are working toward the long-term solution to
like
Haiti.
Catholic Relief Services. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Kim Lamberty, the Director of Mission Engagement with Catholic Relief Services.
Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Pope Francis celebrated Easter at the Vatican yesterday, but he also took part in festivities in Brazil. Kind of. A wax statue of the Holy Father was unveiled yesterday in the small town of Petrópolis. It took part in Easter Mass before being moved to the city's wax museum. The life-size figure was made in London, took 6 months to finish, and it features real human hair and other details resembling Pope Francis. I don't know how I feel about this. The wax pope will join a display featuring more than 24 other statues, including St. John Paul II. And Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI turned 90 on Easter, and today he celebrated Bavarian style. Benedict was surrounded by his brother, Monsignor Georg Ratzinger, other close friends, and a delegation from Bavaria as they enjoyed some beer. Pope Francis visited Benedict last week to wish him a happy Easter and birthday, and we do the same. Up next, opioid epidemic, the ongoing battle to save lives. And Easter around the world, including a huge celebration at the Vatican. I do know that I have this moment. I will be a saint this moment. Words of wisdom on this Monday from our EWTN foundress, Mother Angelica. The opioid epidemic earned a dubious distinction as the #1 cause of accidental death. An estimated 2.6 million Americans are currently addicted to prescription opioids and heroin. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention also reports a spike in opioid overdose deaths from 8,200 in 1999 to, look at this, 33,000 in 2015. Joining us now is Dr. Sally Satel, a resident scholar with the American Enterprise Institute. You also wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, and you treat methadone users.
Right.
Tell us, what role have drug companies played in this epidemic? Have doctors played in this?
Yeah, well, there's enough blame, if you will, to go around. But I do think almost everyone was well-meaning here. Doctors, starting in about the mid-90s or so, they wanted to compensate for what was clearly a widespread undertreatment of pain. It was pretty much limited to cancer patients and terminal patients, but the pendulum swung too far in the other direction. They were a little too liberal with their prescribing. Some drug companies did understate the addictive potential of their drugs, and that was not a good combination.
And hence we wind up with these startling statistics. You work with addicts, and they don't want to give up their drugs, so how do you treat them?
Well, the people in my clinic, thankfully, largely do want to give up.
Because they listen to Sally.
No, they came into, by definition, they came into a treatment program. Now, they came into a program called a methadone program, and methadone itself is an opioid. It's been around since the 60s, and it's a replacement drug, so to speak. It's obviously pharmaceutically pure. People get it once a day, as opposed to heroin, where you don't know what you're getting. Your needles might be dirty. It might be contaminated with fentanyl, which is incredibly powerful, and you have to take it several times a day and spend a lot of your time hustling for it. So methadone once a day, it's a clean drug. A lot of the folks come in at 6:30 in the morning, swallow it, and they're off to their job. So I'm very much in favor of that for people who feel they need it.
Sure. It sounds like you're over your treatment versus punishment, right?
Well, in general, yes. And that, thankfully, is kind of a new attitude that's pretty widespread now among politicians, a lot of enforcement people, what's called a public health approach with an emphasis on treatment, even an emphasis on something called harm reduction, with the recommendations of programs we never would have considered before, like safe injection rooms.
Oh, right. You think that's okay, though?
I have to think it's okay.
Why?
Because fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It is 1,000 to 5,000 times more potent than heroin. You can die with it in your arm before you finish injecting.
And that's a safe treatment, is what you're calling a safe treatment, the fentanyl.
Oh, no. The fentanyl is the deadly synthetic opioid.
You can tell I'm not.
No, it's so powerful. I'm saying it's
Right.
It could be 5 or 10, about 5,000 times more potent than heroin. So this is why we need, I believe, in some cities, they think they need, and I respect local control here, they think they need a place for these folks to go to inject. They bring their own drugs. I know it sounds very controversial, although it's done in Europe and in British Columbia. And there's a nurse there to revive them. And we do have a good antidote.
Very quickly, faith-based organizations, what can they do to help?
They can take people in. They can, I'm for anything that works.
Okay.
And,
well, I think everybody is.
Right. And if someone who finds comfort in that kind of approach, then they should use it, and we should promote it.
Dr. Sally Satel, resident scholar with the American Enterprise Institute, thank you so much for joining us. Pope Francis laments the horrors of war and hatred and makes an appeal for the people of Syria, South Sudan, and Somalia. The Holy Father delivered a powerful message on Easter Sunday to the city of Rome and to the world.
Conforto alla popolazione civile in Siria.
Pope Francis prays for the people of Syria, victims of a civil war. He highlighted famine plaguing parts of Africa and conflicts in Ukraine, Iraq, and the Holy Land. But amidst all the calamities, the Holy Father says only faith can give meaning to suffering in the world. Earlier, the Holy Father celebrated Easter Sunday Mass in St. Peter's Square.
Surrexit Dominus vere.
Some 60,000 people attended, the crowd undergoing tight security checks to hear Francis and receive his blessing.
Ma se il Signore è risorto, come succedono queste cose?
In the face of war, human trafficking, and famine, Pope Francis urges the world to hold on to faith. After Mass, Francis toured the square in his open-topped Pope-mobile, to the delight of the crowd. That does it for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We leave you with a look at Easter celebrations from around the world. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night, and God bless.